fruits and vegetables and baked pies. My father bought the lot next to us, and unlike many people in Shaker, he didn't turn it into a pool or a tennis court. It was a huge garden that provided for our family. It was the source of some of the canning. And we had a compost pile in the early 60s. I think it was the only one in Shaker Heights. No one knew that. My mother's interest in the environment turned to concern in 1962 when she read Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. And I remember the book by her bedstead, and I remember them talking to us about the importance of the environment. They exposed us to nature through parks. We used to come out to, is it still called Squaw Rock? No, I didn't think so. But we used to come out every spring for a picnic. We used to spend time in metropolitan parks. Every summer we went to Yellowstone or Glacier or Lake Louise or Banff. We camped and we traveled, and it was always about parks. Back to my parents, really. Although my father was often the face of the big projects they took on, like the West Woods, my mother was his partner and supporter in all these efforts. They shared a commitment to the parks, and it was really because they believed in equity. And they thought the parks were places where all people, regardless of economic circumstances or cultural, their cultural beginnings, could come and enjoy nature. My mother died 20 years before my father, so a lot of the stories are about him, but she was really part of it. I wanted to say that I think my dad's success in the Geauga parks, as well as in life, was based on the fact that he could build trust and leverage relationships. I can give you a couple of examples. He had a relationship with Case Western Reserve, where Mom had gotten a master's degree. And he and Christy Burr, his friend, really believed in home health care that kept people in their homes as they aged. And they did a lot of that work with Case Western Reserve. My dad leveraged that relationship with the president of Case Western Reserve to add the NASA astronomical station onto Observatory Park. Another example is he was on the board of Davy Tree Company for 65 years. And he got Davy Tree Company to make the centennial oak tree at Union Chapel in Newberry into it had the first conservation easement ever on a tree. And they installed a lightning protection system so that nature wouldn't destroy the tree. Now Union Chapel is in partnership with the Geauga Parks, something my dad laid the groundwork for. And he was very persistent. 30 years ago, he spoke to the family that owned Snow Lake about why they ought to preserve it and make it, part of the public trust. And guess what? It persisted through the generations. The parents didn't listen to him, but finally the kids did. And now that's a Nature Conservancy property. So you get the idea. Their lessons to us were leverage your relationships, be persistent, and take care of the natural world. We're trying to remember those lessons, and my brothers and I made a legacy grant this year to the Geauga Parks of $100,000 from the Ginn Family Foundation, something my father left. And it's in honor, really, of my parents. We can't think of a better way to remember them. We used to tease him and say that he spent his whole life helping preserve nature, and he got a road named after him. People know the Bill Ginn Parkway going into Westwoods. I know they would be so pleased with being honored by you all today. So thank you for inviting me to come out and listening to my story.
Christy didn't come as far as from Maine. She did come from Burton. But I can't tell you how helpful she was. She did help us with the biography information in the program, but she asked that she read the final copy before we put it to the publisher. So it took a while, but we did finally agree to it, and she said something very nice when she came in today. She said she liked the bio in the program.
It's all yours, seriously.
Hi, everybody. It's so good to see everyone again. It's like, when someone departs, you lose contact with some of the people that were so instrumental in all of the strategy and the effort to make something as great as it is. We traveled so many places where people say, Geauga Park District, they really made a mark for themselves. They really have an incredibly refined, excellent, well-documented, well-detailed park. And people who don't even know where Geauga is, right? Or they say, Geauga, right? But let me tell you something about Bill. I want to tell you about his hands. Whether it was going with John and Mira into a vernal pool to pull up a polywog, or taking a shovel to dig the first, turn over the first piece of earth at Observatory Park. Those hands were the things that guided him. He was an exceptionally good editor for the Yale Journal, don't you know, the Yale Law School Journal. So all of us received big red marks on anything we wanted to ever do, whether it was writing a grant or writing a story or looking at some of the efforts from the Geauga Park staff. You get these big circles of red. It wasn't just the hand, it was the mind behind the man. That's the Bill Ginn I knew. That's the Bill Ginn who was my mentor, my friend. Jeff and I both learned so much from Bill, and quite often it was showing up in a suit from downtown, coming up to the dairy, and I'd say, help me deliver this calf. And there he was, pulling with his hands the calf out of the cow as he struggled. When it was taking care of his wife Arlene, who had a stroke, and for 7 years lived at home with round-the-clock care, it was the tenderness that he showed her, and he never treated her as anything different than his equal partner in life. Arlene was also there to support the family and other initiatives. As you all know, it wasn't just about the parks. However, they were a team, and they yoked together. They often spoke, Arlene spoke Norwegian, and so you'd often hear the sound "ufta" when something wasn't going right. And then you'd see the hands running out to either get the cat that had fallen in the pond, or out to the garden where there was a dahlia, because he loved to grow dahlias. And those were also dug and planted by the hands of the man and the love of the woman that he loved. I want to introduce a friend who's here, Irina Sarek. She was helping over the last 6 months to give Bill the quality of life that he so richly deserved. And I was so glad to have you here with us today, because he also would say to her, now let me tell you about Geauga Park District. I think you heard that every day. But you are his legacy. Not just the family who really had to sit there and watch all this going on, and didn't always know kept everything pretty quiet sometimes. So they read it in the papers just like the rest of us. But Bill sent them clippings of every Park District article there was. But I miss him, and I'm sure you do too, but the collaboration is your legacy. Whether it was Bob McCullough, who sat there in the late hours of the evening as they would brainstorm over what policy or what piece of property they needed to connect, or Dan going with a prothonotary warbler in a canoe where we almost tipped over that day, if you remember that, Dan? And maybe it was Marta Stone, who is here living in Geauga County, but is the president of the Ohio chapter of the Nature Conservancy, making sure that things were right and sending her messages to do more. Reach out, do more. You can do it, Marta. Those are the Bill Ginn stories that I love and treasure, and you, as you teach your children and your grandchildren, and take your grandchildren, as Bill did, to the pools and say, look at that turtle. That's there because you all helped protect that. Thank you for making him as successful as he was, it is through your acts of kindness. Tom Curtin, you're a marvelous person to have choreographed some of that, and I'm glad you're going to be speaking.
Well, it's because of Bill.
So welcome, and thank you so much. Now, one more quick thing, and I asked Barb if we could do this. One of the things we always did as we were traveling to these things was sing. So I'm going to engage you in singing. You're going to do the verse, okay? So we're going to do the verse one time around, and then I'll do, you're going to do the refrain. The